Tonight, you might tuck a child into bed, alone, in a quiet room, behind a closed door. It feels normal. It feels like it's always been this way. But the real answer is far stranger than that. For most of human history, no child slept alone. No child was raised by just two people. And the version of parenting you think is natural might actually be one of the newest inventions in the human story. Start with a number. 2. That's how many primary caregivers most modern children have. A mother, a father, sometimes just one of them. This feels obvious. It feels biological. It isn't. Anthropologist Sarah Hrdy has spent much of her career studying how early humans actually raised their young, and her research points somewhere unexpected. Human children weren't raised by two people. They were raised by many. She calls it cooperative breeding. Grandmothers, aunts, older siblings, unrelated adults in the group all took turns holding, feeding, watching, and teaching the youngest members of the community. A baby might be passed from arm to arm dozens of times in a single day. Not because the mother was absent, because the whole group considered that child, in some sense, theirs. Think about what that means for a moment. Your instinct to see parenting as a two-person job, exhausting, isolating, entirely dependent on one or two adults. That's not the ancestral pattern. That's the anomaly. So why did humans evolve this way? Because human infants are unusually demanding. Compared to other primates, human babies are born extremely underdeveloped. A newborn chimpanzee can cling to its mother's fur almost immediately. A human newborn can barely lift its own head. Researchers studying this gap call it secondary altriciality, and the leading explanation ties it to something dramatic. Human brains grew so large that babies had to be born earlier, before the skull became too big to pass through the birth canal. The result? Years of intense, expensive dependency. One mother, alone, physically could not gather enough food, carry a helpless infant, and keep older children alive at the same time. The math didn't work. So the species adapted socially instead of biologically. It spread the cost of childhood across the whole group. Here's where it gets stranger. This wasn't just about survival. It shaped how children learned to think about other people. Anthropologist Barry Hewlett spent years living among and studying the Aka, a hunter-gatherer group in Central Africa, and documented something remarkable about fatherhood specifically. AKA fathers, he found, held their infants for close to half of daylight hours, far more direct physical contact than typical in industrialized societies. Fathers weren't distant providers working somewhere else. They were present, constantly, holding, soothing, carrying. And it wasn't just parents. Children themselves were caregivers. In many traditional societies, kids as young as 6 or 7 were given real responsibility for younger siblings, not as a chore, but as an expected normal part of growing up. Psychologist Melvin Connor, who has studied childhood across cultures for decades, found that in numerous hunter-gatherer societies, older children spend a significant portion of their day directly caring for toddlers, teaching them, feeding them, keeping them safe. Pause on that. A 6-year-old, trusted with a life. That would sound alarming today. In most of human history, it was simply how children learned responsibility, by practicing it early and by being surrounded by enough adults that the stakes of a mistake were rarely catastrophic. Now think about how children actually learned in that world. There was no school, no structured curriculum, no sitting still at a desk for 6 hours a day. Instead, learning happened through direct observation and gradual participation. A child watched an adult make a tool, tried a clumsy version themselves, failed, watched again, tried again. Play wasn't separate from learning. Play was learning. Young children practiced throwing, digging, weaving, tracking, often mimicking adult tasks with smaller, safer versions of real tools. There was also, researchers consistently find, far less punishment than you might expect. Physical discipline existed, but in many documented hunter-gatherer societies, direct confrontation with a misbehaving child was rare. Instead, adults used teasing, storytelling, and social pressure from the wider group to gently correct behavior. A child who did something dangerous wasn't isolated. They were folded back into the group, often through humor rather than shame. Why does that matter to you right now? Because your instinct to feel guilty when you're tired, when you can't be everything to your child at once, when you need someone else to step in, that instinct might be misplaced. It's not a sign you're failing at something humans were built to do alone. It's a sign you're missing something humans were never supposed